Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Turing podcast. Today, we're bringing you an episode recorded earlier this year, before the COVID-19 pandemic, and before the postponing of the football season. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Turing podcast, a production of the Alan Turing Institute, the UK's National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence.
Welcome to the Turing podcast. I'm Effie Dennis.
And I'm Ben Walden, and we're here today in our sunny London office, which is shocking for a Friday morning, but it's okay. Today we're going to be talking to a colleague of ours, Nick Barlow, about a program he's made called AIrsenal, which uses machine learning to try and predict and win at fantasy football. Do you support football, Effie?
Yes, I do. However, in the interests of neutrality, I am going to have to not disclose the team.
Our producer's laughing at me because I said support football rather than support football.
Oh, no, I heard team. That.
And the reason for that is because I just know absolutely nothing about football.
So what's your sport, Ben?
I watch NFL.
I'm sorry, what?
American football.
Can everybody in this room and all of our listeners please just understand what we've just heard? Sorry, please explain.
It's really slow, like cricket, and so I don't really need to watch it. I can just have it on in the background and it makes me happy.
Oh, okay. So it's the podcast of sports.
Something like that, exactly. All right, now we'll move on to our main segment where we interview Nick Barlow about AIrsenal. We're here with Nick Barlow, Senior Research Software Engineer at the Turing. How are you doing, Nick?
Hello, I'm fine, thanks, Ben. How are you?
Really good. So Nick has built an artificial intelligence tool to help him win at fantasy football. Nick, what have you built?
Well, first of all, it's not really to help me win. I have my own team as well, which I'm trying to compete with the AI bot. But yeah, essentially what we have is a software package called AIrsenal. It was developed by me and another data scientist here at the Turing last season to try and sort of, as a fun side project, see if we could use machine learning to do well at fantasy football, since it's a game which involves lots of numbers, lots of sort of predictions you might want to make. And yeah, it's sort of a good learning experience and test case for it.
That's pretty cool. How does fantasy football actually work? What are the baselines?
So basically, it's an online game where there are about 7 million players this season, I think. Everyone picks a squad of 15 players who are sort of based on real-life Premier League footballers. And week by week, these players get points based on how well the real footballers do in Premier League matches. So if you pick a forward and they score a goal, then your player gets some points. So you have some constraints in your team. You can't pick all the same Manchester City or Liverpool players. You can't pick just all the best, most expensive players. You have some limited budget. But basically, yeah, you're trying to compete with other players to get the best squad of 15 players and get more points every week. And eventually, yeah, just see how well you can do.
Has anyone tried to use AI to win fantasy football before?
Yeah, so I think probably quite a few people do. The one that we know about was the University of Southampton. They had they wrote a paper about it actually back in 2012, and they're using quite a similar model to what we are. It's based on this Dixon and Coles Bayesian model for how teams might perform against each other.
So how is yours better?
Well, we're not sure it is better. It's actually having a bit of a rubbish season so far, but yeah, I think so. The challenges are sort of twofold. So first of all, you've got to try and predict how many points each player is going to score in every match. Then you've got to try and optimize your team to get the most points, to get the highest scoring players into your team every week. Given that you can't change your team every week, you can only make a couple of transfers.
So does that mean it starts to get better as the season progresses and it gets more data to put in?
Well, we train it with the past 3 seasons' data, so it's got plenty of data to start off with, except for the newly promoted teams. That's a bit more of a challenge. But But that's also a drawback because I think we're doing quite badly this season because things changed between last season and this season, and our team wasn't really ready for that. So, for example, Chelsea...
Football's never really the same.
Exactly, yeah.
Never.
Chelsea, for example, had a good defence historically, but this season they kind of don't. So we had lots of Chelsea players in our team at the start, and they lost us lots of points. So that's one example of...
Well, as somebody that used to live by the Chelsea Stadium, this doesn't surprise me. It's very on brand for Chelsea, not that I'm biased. But it feels like a perfect opportunity to ask, which other teams have managed to throw your algorithm out of whack?
Well, I think we've had some bad luck all around, just in terms of we've had Man City players quite a lot, and usually they can be relied upon to do very well. But they've had a few off weeks.
Okay.
We always seem to have you in your squad. You have 2 goalkeepers. But only one of them gets you points every week. We seem to always have the wrong one picked, and the other one saves a penalty or something. It seems like everything
You can't catch a break.
Yeah, but having said that, we actually gained 1 million places in the last 2 weeks, so we're on the up.
1 million places?
Yeah, it sounds good.
It does sound good.
But
Up
starting
from
from
where,
low.
though?
Yeah, exactly. That's what the bit I'm not saying. But we're now in the top half of the whole rankings though, and we've just overtaken the bot's just overtaken my team as well last week. So
I was going to ask about that actually. Do you back yourself at fantasy football?
Yeah, so in the past I've been just outside the top 1,000 out of a few million, and the first, I was number 1 in Switzerland for about 20 weeks of one season.
You heard it here first on the Turing podcast. That's our claim to fame. You're obviously the star player at the Turing.
So I'm not quite Magnus Carlsen, but I do spend way too much time looking at this and trying my best to do well.
How does fantasy AI actually predict how many points each player is going to get? How does it do what it does?
Okay, so there are 2 levels to it. So there's a team level model and a player level model. So for the team level, what we do is we look at all the Premier League results over the past 3 seasons, and we're basically fitting parameters for the attacking ability of each team, defensive ability of each team, and the home advantage coefficient. And that means we can predict a probability for every scoreline for every match. So, for example, if a team like Liverpool with a very good attack is playing a team like Norwich with a very bad defence at home for Liverpool, then it's likely to be quite a good scoreline for Liverpool. So we get probability for every scoreline for every match.
Every single scoreline for every single match?
Yeah.
Who's
Bloody
doing
hell,
the
that must be a
legwork
big
for
data set.
That's the small bit of the data set, to be honest. So there are 380 matches a season. So we sort of have about 1,000 or so matches that go into training in the model, and then we have to predict 10 every week, and we normally look 3 weeks ahead. So that's that's one part of it. The player level model is then on top of that. For attacking players, we look at for every goal that team scores, what are the chances of that player scored it or assisted it or did neither, and that's a sort of trinomial model, and that means we can get a prediction for the points for every player for every fixture.
And for those of us who are, let's say numerically challenged, what would you say a trinomial model was?
So it's just basically dividing the probability into the 3 possibilities. So more often you hear about a binomial model. If you're tossing a coin, then it can be heads or tails. Then the distribution describes this as a binomial. So here we have 3 possibilities. The player scored a goal, assisted a goal, or did neither. So that's the trinomial.
Okay. I kind of want to go back to how real world football is affecting your algorithm. I think it's almost a perfect example of how real term issues sort of affect how we work with data. And so I wanted to ask you if you have any more examples or how it might actually affect how you're changing the code in real time.
So, well, I think that the sort of satisfying things that happen in this with this AI bot is when it spots something that we don't spot. So both myself and Jack here at the Turing, we both work on it. Every week we sort of run the predictions, we look at it, and we both follow football and we know a little bit about it, we like to think. But once in a while, then we get some sort of curveball prediction and we think, wow, where did that come from? And when we check it out, then it's right, then it's quite satisfying. So, for example, Danny Ings, who plays for Southampton, who had a very bad start of the season, but he was scoring goals and assisting goals kind of under the radar for a lot of the season. And then the bot said, put him in the team. We were like, that's crazy.
How easy is it to kind of trace this stuff back and figure out why the bot has made this decision?
It takes a few minutes of sort of, sort of.
Do you mean actual minutes, or are we talking more a sort of long term, a couple of hours of slog?
Well, once you get a bit of practice at it, then it is literally a few minutes. Yeah, but
that's such a modest answer.
The first time was a bit longer. Yeah. You could just look at the actual results and see how many goals he's been scoring. But then you can sort of look ahead and see why the bot predicts he's going to score more points, which is looking at fixtures coming up and so on.
Sorry, I can't help but ask. Do we know if the Premier League is actually using any such technology in their decision making in real time?
I think they probably are. I think probably the teams are. So I think, Liverpool, who are obviously doing incredibly well this season, have got a whole...
Sorry, I've never heard of them.
There's some team from up north.
Right, okay. Yeah.
They wear red, big in the 80s. They've got a whole team of data scientists, I believe. So I don't really know. I think they're sort of like looking at more decision-making for their players, like when is good for players to be making these runs or making these passes.
But don't people bet quite a lot of money on fantasy football? Do you think that betting companies are doing something similar?
Probably. Well, I don't know about betting on fantasy football. They probably bet on real football. And so probably something like the match level results. In fact, the original paper, the Dixon and Coles paper, which we base our model on, the original premise of that was to see could they do better than bookmakers' odds. But that was back in the 90s. And for sure, the bookies will have learned everything they could from this, and they'll have their own models, which are more sophisticated now.
They're doing the same thing. Something I was going to ask was, you said that the training data goes back 3 seasons. How do you weight that? Does data from older seasons weigh for less than more recently?
That's an excellent question. I think that was part of the problem with our performance at the start of the season is it wasn't. So, we were kind of like...
So that's the next plan.
Yeah, so I think there's some improvement like that has already gone in, but it was too late to save our first few weeks of the season. So intuitively and obviously practically, it makes sense to weight the further back data a bit lower. In practice, how to do it in a principled way that you can sort of justify why you're doing it this way is a bit more tricky. So it's something we're still thinking about the best way to do it.
If this old paper was talking about getting better odds than the bookmakers, is it actually legal to use a tool like that to make bets against betting companies?
Sorry, before you answer this, I just want to point out that aside from legal, if it was legal, is it ethical? It's a 2-part question, I suppose.
So I don't know. I'm not a gambler myself, and I don't know much about the law relating to gambling. I would imagine there's probably an area where something is legal, but the betting companies wouldn't like you to do it, so they may have terms and conditions that forbid it. But yeah, I don't know.
So you're not going to be betting on it anytime soon, then?
No. I think I've got plenty of other ways to lose my money.
AIrsenal isn't doing very well this year. Has it done well in previous years? Is it getting worse?
Well, this is only its second season. In the first season, it did better. Well, it came in the top sort of 25-30%, I believe, and that was with a drop-off within the last couple of weeks. At some point, it was doing in the top 10% or so. There's a large amount of luck involved. So I think the code, the model wasn't improved this year, but it wasn't any worse. But we just had a very unlucky start of the season, and Chelsea let us down. Now it's on the up. Who knows? I mean, we might still finish roughly where we finished last season. Then there's always next season. We can always look ahead to this. So I think we're now in the top half. We're definitely improving.
You're on the up.
Yeah,
it's getting
exactly.
better.
Yeah. Whereas my personal team is on the big downer. But, that's a different matter. But yeah,
I think it's time to start copying AIrsenal.
Yeah,
certainly should do.
But isn't it a bit like playing yourself if you do that?
Yeah. So there's a bit of history to myself and Angus, the other original author.
Okay.
In that we both played fantasy football before we wrote this spot. And he beat me by 1 point the season before last. And this is out of 2,000 or so points, literally 1 point on the last day of the season. So last season, I was quite satisfied that the bot beat him by 1 point. And I beat them both by a few hundred.
That's actually what you built it for, just specifically to rub it in for,
to
for
beat
this
Angus.
loss.
Exactly, yeah. And I told this to Harry, our digital content editor, and he sent me back a Wikipedia page for people destroyed by their own inventions, which I thought was quite appropriate.
That, as somebody that works quite closely with Harry, that sounds very on brand. Yeah.
What's next for the code? The tool you've built, have you got any plans to make it better?
Yes. So actually what's encouraging with this season as well is not just that we're doing a bit less badly than we did a couple of months ago, but actually as an open source software project, AIrsenal is kind of getting a bit of traction. So we have...
Wait, so AIrsenal is open source?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the code is available on GitHub.
Yeah.
And we really encourage anyone who wants to look at it or use it, or even better, contribute to it. Then...
How many contributions have you received so far?
So I think we've had bug reports, which is like a contribution for sure.
Some people, are very invested in that process, and that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely helpful. We've had these from about sort of 5 or 6 people, I think, and a couple of pull requests from people who've actually found bugs and done the fix, and then they're asking us to incorporate the fix into the main code, which is fantastic. So. It's really great that.
And how do you acknowledge them? Like, do you just say thank you, or?
Yeah, so exactly. So we interact on GitHub, which is this sort of web platform for open source software development, and so we have sort of a dialogue on there where they sort of write down what their issue is, and we respond to this. And generally, it's I think it's just good practice as a software developer and also as a human being, just to always be nice and friendly and welcoming on these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been good so far.
I feel like I'll take that advice into the rest of my life as well. Up until now, I've just been awful. Do you have any plans for what you want to do next with the code? Have you got any more coefficients that you'd like to include, or factors that could affect the season somehow?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think we're going to have a hack session in a couple of weeks. So 3 of us developing it here, and Angus, who's subsequently left the Turing, are going to sort of meet up and have a whole day hackathon, I think. What I would like to get working is... firstly, to improve the speed of the optimization. So currently we look 3 weeks ahead, and this takes probably about half an hour or an hour to run and using all the cores of a very powerful machine. I think we can do better by a factor of 2 or 3. And once that's working...
That's pretty good.
Maybe, yeah. I've got some ideas, but just need to figure out how to do it.
Nick is a very high achiever, clearly, and let's not knock it.
But then I think even more important, once we've got that working, is... to be able to replay an entire past season. So at the moment, it's a bit clunky to do this, and it'd be lots of manual operations. If we could do it sort of automatically, that way we can say, if we did this rather than this, how would that have affected last season? And so we can really sort of try and optimize the way we do things then. So for example, like when we play this wild card where you change your whole team, or how many weeks ahead should we look? Or, should we sort of do things a bit differently? We can actually sort of compare with real data and see.
Wait, so at the moment you have been having to do it all on live season data. You've not been starting and testing out on the past few years.
Yeah, so we're training our model with the past few years, but we're not sort of running it on past data. We kind of could with a bit of tweaking, but it's not really an easy operation right now. Okay, we want to make that better.
A big part of fantasy football is picking the starting squad. Given that there's quite a big cost to transferring players, and that can affect you pretty heavily as the season goes on. How does the tool pick the players to start the year?
Yeah, so that is one of the biggest challenges, because the search space is enormous. There's sort of, I think, 700 or so players registered. So there's, countless possible teams that you could play. So the way we do it is we do, first of all, the points predictions for every player for the first 5 or so fixtures. Then you can put all the players in order of how many points we think they're going to get. And then we just start filling up our team based on going down that list. But quite quickly, then you fall foul of the constraints. So you can't have all Liverpool players. You can't have more than 3 Liverpool players.
Would you want all Liverpool players?
Well, this season, yeah, I think so. And you've got a cost budget. The players have a price for them, and you can't exceed this. And generally, like, the high cost players are correlated with the high predicted points players. So then the randomness comes in. We kind of, like, once we've run out of money, then we randomly remove a player, and then we sort of like stick in the next best one we can afford. And we repeat this iteratively until we fill up our squad. And then we do that whole process about 100 times, and we take the best expected points squad to be our starting team. So,
Effie, do you watch football?
I do actually, yeah.
And who do you support?
Look, in the interest of the neutrality that we're all committed to at the Turing, I can't disclose that information, but I can tell you that it's not Chelsea or Liverpool or Arsenal.
So it's not been a good season then?
Well, I don't support Arsenal, so actually, yeah, it has been a good season.
oh, wow. Right, I'm going to storm out of this thing.
I've got to ask, why did you call it AIrsenal? Was it just a snazzy name, or is there something behind
No,
it?
I feel like, yeah, why did you?
Well, both Angus and I are Arsenal fans. But yeah, I don't know. I think we just didn't come up with a better name in time. We actually we talked about it for a long time doing this. We only actually finally got around to doing it. We were both on the train up to Newcastle for a meeting, and we literally started writing the code on the train. And then before we knew it, we had a GitHub repository. And
How long does that journey take again?
About 3 hours. It wasn't working after 3 hours.
Okay,
It was
I mean, that's how it started. I
Yeah.
think that speaks to how, the British rail system just inspires innovation, even with future technologies.
This feels like a separate but equally important tangent.
I'm a big fan of long rail journeys. Some of my best work has come from having to sit on a train for an unspecified amount of time, typically to the north of the country as well. So
Me too. I don't like these new coffee cups they do where you have like the filter in the lid though. That
no,
seems a bit
it's
weird.
unacceptable. None
Do
of
you
that.
think your fantasy football tool would be much better if you had a straw to drink your coffee with?
I think, well, it's a possibility.
Because you kind of reduce the amount of time you have to spend looking away from the screen.
Yeah.
Or like a camelback of some sort.
This is one of the reasons we need to like get the code in place to replay the whole season so we can test these sort of hypotheses out.
Yeah, these are all variables that need to be taken into account.
I am stepping away from the code for a second. I have a couple of very urgent questions. One, can you confirm the pronunciation of AIrsenal? AI for Arsenal? How are we pronouncing that?
So this is also a controversial topic. I think Angus, who's the original co-creator, calls it AIrsenal. I call it AIrsenal.
Right.
But yeah, I guess I'm
Because that's what adults do.
Yeah, I guess since I'm representing it on a podcast, then what I say goes. Sorry, Angus.
Sorry,
All right.
Angus. Complaints on a postcard to Nick directly. Yeah.
It looks like we're running a bit short of time.
So just to wrap up, Nick, is there anything that you would like to tell our wonderful listeners about AI for Arsenal, AIrsenal, or whatever we're calling it?
AIrsenal.
AIrsenal. I'll get there in the end. Patience, Ben, patience.
So, well, just to say that there's a couple of blog posts up on the Turing website. So if you search for AIrsenal there or look at the program articles pages, then there's a couple of blogs there. Also, the GitHub repository is at the Alan Turing Institute's AIrsenal. And yeah, please, if you're interested in using it or even contributing, then that'd be fantastic.
Are you on social media? Is there anywhere else that the people can reach you and perhaps talk to you about this brilliant project?
So our team has this Turing Hut 23 Twitter handle, which is one place which someone will tell me if something right somewhere there. Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick, for taking the time to speak with us today. We really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
To learn more about the work going on at the Alan Turing Institute, visit our website at turing.ac.uk. To get in touch with the podcast team if you have any questions or suggestions, email us at podcast@turing.ac.uk.
Music for this episode was provided by Jamin Sun. You can listen to his latest releases at jaminsun.bandcamp.com.
The Turing Podcast is hosted by Ed Cowstry, Tara Callum, Ben Walden, Effie Dennis, and produced by Dan Whitfield for the Alan Turing Institute.